Hello there. So Elden Ring, everyone wants that DLC announcement, but until then we have to keep ourselves occupied with something, right? And hiding out as a chair to butt stab unaware invaders only gets one so far. So in the latest patch, Uchigatana plus 25, what are the best ashes of war for it? First up, we have the keen Uchigatana, and for our ash of war here, we have the standard unsheath. Now there's a few reasons for this. Firstly, for those who just like straight up pure physical damage output and getting the most out of it, this is a great route, while at the same time also dealing a great amount of poise damage, thanks to that unsheath attack. But what this route also allows is flexibility. If you want to use incantations or resins for particular fights, then you're not going to be locked out of that with this option, whereas some of the other routes and ashes will lock you out of that ability. This is just a solid, reliable way to use the Uchigatana, and it's a reliable option from the beginning of the game all the way to the end. No matter where you are on your journey, the keen Uchigatana will definitely have your back. And for those certain bosses or enemies immune to bleed or frost, for example, you don't have to worry about your Ash of War being basically useless. The keen Uchigatana just don't care, so keeping it simple actually offers you a hell of a lot here. So definitely keep the keen option in mind with Unsheath if you want simplicity and flexibility, and if you're just going for a straight up dex build, then it's definitely a great option. Build stats I'll chuck at the bottom for you. Next up, we are going Blood, and we are going with Seppuku for our Blood Uchigatana. Now I will just make a quick point though. If you are early game and value as much of your health bar as possible, then opt for Bloody Slash instead. You can find it earlier on and it won't eat into your health as much. But if you are late game or going into subsequent New Game Plus runs, or just looking for something to take into future DLC, then go with Seppuku and I'll explain why. Now all the Blood Ashes of War are pretty much on par on paper when you're looking at their stats basically, but in practice and utility is where things get spicy and why I generally opt for Seppuku, and the main reason is convenience. Seppuku, you don't have to worry about timing it correctly in boss fights or worry about missing the boss with your Ash of War. You can activate it at the entrance so that it's ready to go when you enter, and it lasts for quite a long time. Another great feature is that because it inflicts blood loss on yourself, that still activates other items like your talismans and your armor. So stuff like Lord of Blood's Exaltation or the White Mask are going to be activated by Seppuku, buffing your damage instead of having to wait until it's built up enough on bosses or enemies. So right out of the gate, you go in max already. It also coats your weapon in blood, which increases the bleed buildup it inflicts as well. Bleed is extremely powerful against most enemies and bosses in the game. Some are immune, of course, but not many. So there's a lot happening with Seppuku, and for a bleed route, it is really super awesome, even after the nerfs of previous patches. Next up, we have our cold Uchigatana, and say hello to Hoarfrost Stomp. Now, gone are the days where Hoarfrost Stomp was ridiculously overpowered, but it still has its place amongst the best because at the end of the day, it's still Frost, and Frost is awesome. So Hoarfrost Stomp provides a few things. Firstly, that Frost buildup, which when built up enough on an enemy, it does a damage burst, much like Bleed does, and also debuffs them for a set amount of time, so their stamina recovery is reduced, and they take slightly more damage. So very useful effects. Hoarfrost Stomp also has a use case for crowd control situations. Because it's a wide area of effect Ash of War, it can hit multiple enemies that are coming towards you or in a certain area, and bigger bosses can definitely be more susceptible to this as well. So for those who love going for frost builds, Hoarfrost Stomp still definitely go to option, at least on the Uchigatana here, but it is also amazing as a dual wield option, and I'll get into that in a moment. But if you're enjoying, then hit that subscribe button and stick around for more content. Now we go to the options for dual wielding, and this is where it can get really interesting because there's a few paths you can take. Now if you start off as the samurai class, then in the same playthrough you can get a second Uchigatana. Otherwise you'll need New Game Plus for that, or you can just substitute a Nagakiba in instead. It's just slightly heavier and has a bit more range, but essentially the same thing. But I have two Uchis here for demonstration purposes. First up, all out bleed with two blood Uchigatanas for that insane blood buildup. Seppuku on one and Bloody Slash on the other. Chuck Seppuku on the offhand one so it can be activated before an encounter, and then Bloody Slash can be activated during the fight when needed. Obvious reasons for this combo is bleed is extremely powerful, and well, two of these will get that build up extremely quickly. Second option is the bleed and frost combo, a bit of blood and a bit of frost. It's a great pairing, both will deal damage bursts once the build up reaches its point, but the frost comes in handy as it debuffs the enemy so they take more damage, which then our blood Uchigatana can take advantage of. But arguably the best, or at least the most interesting pairing, will be a fire and frost combo. Frost functioning exactly how it always does, so when it builds up enough, it damage bursts and debuffs them, but where the flame comes in handy here is that you can remove the frost debuff from that enemy or boss by hitting them with a flame weapon, thus allowing you to immediately start building up the frost on them again for that damage burst instead of having to wait for that debuff timer to wear off. And the reason you do this is because you mainly want that damage burst, because that's what's helping you the most. Same thing can be achieved by swapping to a torch and just smacking the enemy with it since it's fire based, but for the Ash of War, Flames of the Red Mane is the best option there. Even though it also saw nerfs, it's still really good and does great poise damage. But let me know in the comments what your favorite Ash of War is for the Uchigatana. Is it a poison one, maybe? Holy one? You're fighting an uphill battle if that's the case, but I can respect that. But for now, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.